Jake Morrison stood in the center of the massive chamber, feeling smaller than he ever had in his 42 years. The space around him was enormous, with walls that curved up and away until they disappeared into shadows high above. Hundreds of alien beings sat in rows that spiraled around the room like the inside of a giant shell. Their eyes, in every color and shape he could imagine, were all focused on him. The air tasted strange here. It had to be filtered and mixed to keep everyone alive, since so many different species needed different things to breathe. Jake's throat felt dry, but he could not show weakness, no. He was the voice of Earth, the last chance for humanity to join the stars. Ambassador Morrison of Earth, the voice came from above him. Jake looked up to see Speaker Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire. The alien was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin that seemed to shimmer under the chamber's lights. 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his face stared down without warmth. You may present your species' final request. Final request. The words hit Jake like a punch. 3 years of talks, 3 years of hope, and they were already calling it final. He had flown across space with dreams of partnership, of learning, from civilizations that had traveled between stars for thousands of years. Now it felt like he was at a trial where the verdict was already decided. Jake cleared his throat and began. Honorable members of the Galactic Council, I stand before you representing 7 billion humans who look to the stars with wonder and hope. His voice echoed in the vast space. We have spent the last 50 years learning that we are not alone. In the universe, we have discovered that intelligence and life exist in forms we never dreamed possible. And we have dreamed of the day when we could take our place among you as equals and friends. Some of the aliens shifted in their seats. Others made sounds that might have been laughter or might have been something else entirely. Jake could not tell which reactions were good and which were bad. Reading alien expressions was still impossible for him, even after 3 years of trying. We know we are young, Jake continued. We know we have much to learn. But we also believe we have something to offer. Humans are explorers. We are builders. We are dreamers who turn dreams into reality. In just 100 years, we went from flying in simple machines to walking on our own moon. In 50 years, we built stations that orbit our world and ships that can travel between stars. He paused, looking around the chamber. We are not perfect. We have made mistakes. We have fought wars and hurt our own world. But we have also learned. From every mistake, we have grown. We have changed. And we want to continue growing as part of something bigger than ourselves. A low humming sound filled the chamber. Jake realized it was the aliens talking to each other in ways humans could. Not here. The sound made his bones vibrate. We study the universe with passion, Jake said, raising his voice slightly. We ask questions that others might not think to ask. We solve problems in ways that might seem strange, but often work when traditional methods fail. We believe that every species, every world, every form of life has something unique to contribute to the galaxy. The humming stopped. Speaker Veltar raised one long, thin hand. Ambassador Morrison. Veltar's voice was cold and precise. Your species has been observed for the past 3 years. During this time, the Council has studied your people, your culture, your history, and your behavior. We have reviewed every piece of data you have provided about human civilization. Jake felt his heart beating faster. This was it. The moment that would decide humanity's future. The Council recognizes that humans possess certain capabilities, Veltar continued. Your rate of technological advancement is notable. Your ability to adapt to new environments is impressive. Your mathematical and scientific achievements show promise. Jake began to feel hope rising in his chest. Maybe this would work after all. Maybe humanity would find its place among the stars. However, Veltar's next word crushed that hope like a hammer. The Council has identified fundamental incompatibilities between human nature and the requirements of galactic civilization. The chamber fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the air systems. Jake felt the weight of 7 billion people on his shoulders. Humans demonstrate persistent aggressive tendencies. Veltar read from a device in his hand. Your species has a documented history of warfare spanning your entire recorded history. Even now, conflicts continue on your homeworld. Your emotional responses are unpredictable and often lead to irrational decisions. You prioritize individual desires over collective harmony. You display territorial behaviors that are incompatible with the cooperative nature required for galactic citizenship. Each word felt like a knife. Jake wanted to argue, to explain that humans were more than their worst moments. He wanted to tell them about human kindness, about sacrifice, about the countless times humans had chosen to help others at cost to themselves. But the formal rules of the council chamber meant he could only speak when given permission. Furthermore, Veltar continued, human cultural practices show disturbing variations that indicate an inability to achieve the unified social structure necessary for stable galactic integration. Your species appears incapable of moving beyond primitive emotional responses to achieve the rational, logical decision-making processes that characterize mature civilizations. High above in the observation gallery, Admiral Lessa Hayes watched. Through reinforced transparent aluminum, she commanded the small fleet of human ships that had brought Jake and his diplomatic team to this place. Her hands were clenched into fists as she listened to the judgment being pronounced on her species. The Council's decision, Veltar announced, is unanimous. He looked directly at Jake. Humanity is denied membership in the Galactic Council. Furthermore, it is the recommendation of this body that contact between human civilization and Council member species be limited to essential communications only. Jake felt the words hit him like physical blows. Around the chamber, alien beings began to make various sounds. Some might have been approval, others might have been indifference. None sounded like sympathy. Perhaps, Veltar said with what Jake would swear was contempt, in another 1,000 years, your species might mature enough to join civilized galactic society. Until then, humanity is advised to focus on resolving its internal conflicts and developing more stable social structures. The session was over. Jake stood in the center of the enormous chamber, surrounded by hundreds of alien beings who had just told him that everything humanity dreamed of was impossible, not postponed, not delayed. Impossible, because humans were too flawed, too emotional, too aggressive to deserve a place among the stars. Security escorts appeared at Jake's sides. They were polite but firm as they guided him toward the exit. As he walked through the chamber, the alien beings were already turning their attention to other matters. To them, humanity was already forgotten dot in the observation gallery. Admiral Hayes turned away from the window. Her jaw was set in a way that her crew had learned meant trouble for someone. She had watched her species be judged and found wanting by beings who had never walked on Earth, never seen a human child take its first steps, never witnessed the beauty of human art or the power of human love. The small human delegation left Nexus Prime quietly. No protests, no angry speeches, no dramatic declarations. They simply gathered their belongings, boarded their ships, and prepared for the long journey home. To the aliens watching, it might have looked like acceptance. It might have looked like a defeated species slinking away in shame. They were wrong about that, just like they had been wrong about so many other things concerning humanity. But they would not learn that until much later, when it was too late to change what their rejection had set in motion. 5 years had passed since the doors of the Galactic Council closed on humanity. Captain Ryan Bell stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel, New Horizons, watching a binary star system grow larger on the main screen. Two suns danced around, each other in a cosmic ballet that no human had ever seen before. The sight filled him with the same wonder he had felt as a child looking up at the night sky from his backyard in Ohio. "Captain, we're picking up interesting readings from the out. Fourth planet," said Lieutenant Kelly Grant from her station at the science console. Her voice carried the excitement that came with every new discovery. "The mineral composition is unlike anything in our databases." Ryan smiled. That was happening more and more often these days. Human databases were growing with each new system. They explored, but they were building that knowledge themselves, star by star, planet by planet. It was slower than learning from the vast libraries at the Galactic Council, but it was theirs. "Take us in for a closer look," Ryan ordered. Full scans. The New Horizons was one of 37 human exploration ships, now pushing deep into regions of space that the galactic maps marked as empty or uninteresting. Humanity had taken the Council's rejection and turned it into motivation. If they could not join the galactic community, they would build their own understanding of the universe. 3 systems away, on the growing colony world of New Texas, miners were pulling rare metals from deep underground tunnels. The colony had started with just 500 people 7 years ago. Now it housed nearly 50,000 humans and was producing materials that were making the next generation of human ships faster and stronger than anything Earth had built before. On Earth itself, the reaction to the Council's rejection had surprised many people. There had been anger at first and sadness, but those feelings had quickly turned into something else: determination. If the galaxy thought humans were too primitive to join their club, then humans would prove them wrong by succeeding without them. Dr. Elena Cross walked through the halls of the Deep Space Archaeological Institute, a facility that had not existed when humanity first reached for the stars. The building was carved into an asteroid in the Alpha Centauri system, chosen because it was far from any major trade routes. Here, human scientists were studying artifacts and ruins that predated the known history of galactic civilization. "Director Cross," called Dr. Martin Shaw as he hurried to catch up with her. His face was flushed with excitement. "You need to see what we found in the Kepler 186 ruins." Elena followed him to Laboratory 7, where a team of archaeologists and xenorchaeologists were carefully examining fragments of metal and crystal that looked like they had been shaped by intelligent hands millions of years ago. The pieces were arranged on examination tables under bright lights, each one tagged and catalogued. "These symbols," Martin pointed to markings etched into one of the metal fragments, "they don't match any known galactic language. But when we ran them through the computer, we found something incredible. They follow mathematical patterns that suggest a completely different approach to faster-than-light travel." Elena leaned closer to examine the markings. "How different?" "If we're reading this correctly," Martin said, "whoever built this could travel between galaxies, not just between stars. The energy requirements alone would revolutionize everything we know about physics." Elena felt a familiar mixture of excitement and frustration. This was exactly the kind of discovery that could change the understanding of the universe for every species. Before the rejection, this would have been shared with the Galactic Council, leading to cooperative research and faster progress for everyone. Now it was just another piece of knowledge that humanity would have to decode alone. Meanwhile, on the massive space station Nexus Prime, Council member Tissara of the Melodic Collective was staring at numbers that did not make sense. The melodic species experienced emotion through complex mathematical harmonies, and right now, those harmonies were telling her that something was wrong with the galaxy. Tissara as its people processed information differently than most Council species. Where others saw individual data points, The melodic collective saw patterns and connections across vast amounts of information. For the past year, those patterns have been showing small but consistent irregularities in galactic trade, exploration, efficiency, and innovation rates. The statistical models continue to show deviation from predicted outcomes, she reported to the Council's Economic Planning Committee. Her voice carried harmonics that translated her concern into sounds other species could understand. Trade. Efficiency has decreased by 0.7% annually for the past 3 years. Exploration discovery rates have dropped by 0.4%. Innovation metrics across all member species show similar decline patterns. Council Economic Advisor Zarnkith of the Unified Domains clicked his mandibles in what passed for a shrug. Among his people, 0.7% is within acceptable variance parameters. Random fluctuations are normal in complex systems, but Tisara as harmonies carried doubt. Random fluctuations usually balanced out over time. These patterns were consistent, as if something that had once contributed to galactic progress was no longer there. The truth was that the Council barely thought about humanity anymore. The rejection 5 years ago had been just another routine. Decision. Species applied for membership regularly, and most were rejected for various reasons. It was the natural order of things. Only the most stable, logical, and cooperative species could be allowed to join the galactic community. What the Council did not realize was how much small contributions mattered. Human traders had carried goods between worlds that other species found unprofitable to visit. Human diplomats had solved minor disputes with creative solutions that prevented bigger conflicts. Human researchers had asked questions that led to breakthrough discoveries, not because they were smarter than other species, but because they thought about problems differently. All of that was gone now. The trade routes that had started to include human worlds were rerouted, but the replacement routes were less efficient. The creative solutions to diplomatic problems were no longer available, so conflicts that might have been resolved quickly dragged on longer. The questions that led to innovations were no longer being asked, so progress slowed in ways too small to notice individually, but significant when added together. On the human colony ship Freedom's Dawn, Commander Alex Stone was dealing with a very different kind of problem. His ship carried 15,000 colonists toward a world in the Tau Ceti system, but their route had taken them through a region where they encountered something unexpected. "Captain, we're receiving distress signals," reported communications. Officer Linda Murphy. Multiple ships, different species. They appear to be refugees. Alex looked at the tactical display. Dozens of ships were scattered across the system, many showing damage. The energy signatures identified vessels from at least 6 different species, all Council members. Something had driven them from their homes. "Open a channel," Alex ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the face of an alien Alex recognized as Regellian. The being's usually calm features were twisted with fear and exhaustion. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Verlaine of the merchant ship Bright Current. We are carrying civilian refugees from the Rigel system. Our worlds are under attack by unknown hostile forces. We have injured aboard and are running low on supplies." Alex made his decision without hesitation. "Captain Verlaine, this is Commander Stone of the human vessel Freedom's Dawn. We're prepared to offer assistance." The alien's expression changed to surprise, and then something that might have been relief. "Human vessel? But humans are. Your species does not participate in galactic affairs." "That doesn't mean we ignore suffering when we see it," Alex replied. "Transmit your medical requirements and supply needs. We'll see what we can do." Over the next 6 hours, human medical teams treated injured aliens while human engineers repaired damaged ships. The refugees told stories of attacks by vessels using technology that adapted to any defense. They called the attackers the Voidborn, and they came from the dark spaces between star systems where no one lived out as the freedoms. Dawn and the refugee ships parted ways. Captain Verlin sent a final message. Commander Stone, I do not understand why your people help us when the Council when relations are not formal. But I will remember this kindness. Alex watched the alien ships disappear into hyperspace, carrying their passengers toward Council. Space and safety. He had helped because it was the right thing to do, not because of politics or formal relationships. It was a very human response to suffering, the kind of emotional reaction that the Council had judged too primitive for galactic civilization. What Alex did not know was that his actions had just set in motion events that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. The refugees would carry word of human kindness to Council worlds. They would speak of a species that helped without being asked, that risked their own resources to aid strangers. And in the depths of space, the Voidborn continued their advance toward the heart of Council territory, using tactics and technology that logical, rational responses could not counter. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes 10 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council. Now the galaxy was burning, and the Council's greatest minds could not understand why their enemies always seemed to be one step ahead. Council. Fleet Admiral Corvus stared at the tactical display in the command center of Nexus Prime, watching red markers that represented destroyed worlds. In the past 18 months, the Voidborn had swept through 3 entire sectors, leaving devastation in their wake. Every time the Council forces thought they had found a pattern, every time they believed they had developed an effective strategy, the enemy adapted and struck somewhere unexpected. Report, Corvus ordered as his aide approached. The 7th Fleet engaged the enemy at Kepler 438, the aide said, his voice heavy with defeat. Initial contact proceeded according to Battle Plan Theta 7. Our forces achieved superior positioning and began the standard defensive formation. Corvus already knew how this would end. He had heard the same report too many times. And then, the enemy vessels began using tactics we had never seen before. They ignored our defensive lines and attacked in patterns that seemed random, but somehow worked perfectly. They destroyed 60% of our ships before Admiral Vexara ordered a retreat. Random, but effective. That was the problem that kept the Council's best strategists awake during their rest cycles. The Voidborn fought like no civilized species ever had. They used emotional responses, unpredictable maneuvers, and decisions that seemed to make no logical sense until the devastating results became clear. 3,000 light-years away. Captain. Maya Johnson piloted her reconnaissance ship Starbound through a debris field that had once been a thriving colony. Her orders were simple: gather intelligence on Voidborn tactics and technology. What she found instead changed everything humanity thought they knew about the enemy. Captain, you need to see this, called sensor operator Tim Rodriguez from his station. I'm picking up a structure hidden in the asteroid field. It's not Voidborn construction. Maya guided the ship toward the coordinates Tim had provided. What appeared on their screens was clearly artificial, but the design was unlike anything in human databases. The structure was ancient, covered in symbols and markings that looked familiar but wrong somehow. Those symbols, said Chief Science. Officer Janet Walsh, studying the readouts carefully. They're similar to the markings Dr. Cross found in the Kepler 186 ruins, but they're much older. This thing has been here for thousands of years. Maya made the decision to board the structure. The airlock cycles were still functional, suggesting technology far more advanced than it appeared. Inside, the corridors were filled with displays and control systems that had somehow remained operational across millennia. What they found in the central chamber made Maya's blood run cold. The walls were covered with historical records, images, and data files that told the story of a galactic civilization that had existed long before the current council. And in those records, they found the truth about the Voidborn. "My God," Janet whispered as she translated the ancient text. They weren't always called the Voidborn. They were called the Kethmori. They were part of a galactic council, just like the current one. The records showed a familiar pattern. The ancient galactic civilization had been built on principles of logic, order, and rational thinking. Species that displayed too much emotional behavior, too much unpredictability, or too much individual creativity were marginalized and eventually exiled. The Kethmori had been among the last to be cast out, labeled as too chaotic and dangerous for civilized society. But unlike other exiled species that had simply disappeared into the dark spaces between stars, the Kethmori had survived. More than survived. They had spent thousands of years in exile, their anger and resentment growing with each passing century. They had developed technology specifically designed to counter the logical, predictable tactics of ordered civilizations. Voidborn were not random invaders. They were the children of an ancient injustice, returned to settle a debt that was thousands of years old. Maya transmitted her findings to Earth immediately. Within days, the information was being analyzed by every human strategist, historian, and psychologist. The picture that emerged was terrifying in its clarity. Dr. Nathan Foster led the team analyzing the Kethmori. Records from his office at the Human Strategic Analysis Center on Luna. Nathan had spent years studying conflict resolution and the psychology of warfare. As he read through the translated documents, he began to understand something that chilled him to his core. The Voidborn aren't just attacking randomly, he explained to his colleague Dr. Rebecca Torres during their daily briefing. They're following an emotional logic that rational minds can't predict. Every attack is designed to cause maximum psychological damage, not just military defeat. Rebecca studied the tactical analyses spread across Nathan's desk. "You're saying they're fighting with their feelings?" "More than that," Nathan said. "They're fighting the way people fight when they've been hurt so deeply that logic doesn't matter anymore. They're not trying to conquer the galaxy. They're trying to make the Council feel the same pain they've carried for thousands of years." The insight was brilliant and horrifying. The Council had been treating this as a military problem, but it was really a psychological one. The Voidborn could anticipate logical responses because they understood the rigid thinking patterns of ordered civilizations. They had been studying council-type societies for millennia, planning their revenge with the patience of the truly wronged. Meanwhile, on Nexus Prime, Speaker Veltar was beginning to realize that the Council's greatest crisis was also revealing fundamental flaws in their approach to galactic civilization. In emergency session after emergency session, the same rational minds applied the same logical principles to the same types of problems, always reaching the same types of solutions that the enemy seemed designed to counter. "We need new perspectives," announced Council member Tisara during one particularly frustrating strategy meeting. Her musical voice carried harmonics of desperation that translated clearly to all species present. "Our current approach is failing because we are all thinking in the same way." Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The idea of thinking differently was not something their civilizations embraced easily. "What other perspectives exist?" asked Defense Coordinator Mexver. "We represent the pinnacle of galactic civilization. Our combined wisdom spans thousands of years and dozens of species." Tisarai's harmonics carried a note that might have been irony. "We represent one type of civilization. Logical, ordered, predictable. But logic is not the only form of intelligence." In the silence that followed, some council members began to remember a species they had rejected years ago. A species that thought differently, that solved problems in unexpected ways, that displayed exactly the kind of unpredictable creativity that might counter the Voidborn's advantage. The first unofficial contact came through neutral traders operating in the border regions between Council and human space. The message was simple and direct. Would humanity be willing to share intelligence about the current crisis? The response came from Admiral Lisa Hayes, now commanding Earth's significantly expanded fleet. Her message was equally direct. Humanity had been analyzing the situation and had insights to offer. But those insights came with conditions. We're not interested in joining your council or fighting your war, Hayes transmitted to the secret council delegation that had authorized the contact. But we're willing to share what we've learned, because innocent people are dying. The meeting took place on a neutral world in the DMZ between human and council space. The council delegation was small and unofficial, led by Tessara and including Admiral Corvus. The human delegation was headed by Dr. Nathan Foster and included Captain Maya Johnson, who had discovered the truth about the Voidborn's origins. Your enemy is not what you think they are, Nathan began without ceremony. They're not random attackers or primitive raiders. They're the product of the same kind of thinking that led to humanity's rejection 10 years ago. He showed them the evidence Maya had discovered, the records of the ancient Kethmori and their exile from galactic civilization. The council delegates listened in growing horror as they realized they were facing their own history, returned to judge them. The Voidborn can predict your tactics because they understand how ordered civilizations think, Maya explained. They've had thousands of years to study rational, logical responses to military situations. But they can't predict emotional responses, creative solutions, or strategies based on empathy and understanding. Admiral Corvus clicked his mandibles skeptically. You suggest we abandon reason and logic? We suggest you expand your definition of reason, Nathan replied. Sometimes the most logical response is to think illogically. Sometimes the most rational strategy is to embrace irrationality. The council delegates struggled with concepts that challenged everything their civilizations had taught them. But as the reports of fresh defeats continued to arrive, they began to realize that their choice was simple. Adapt their thinking or watch the galaxy burn. The seeds of change had been planted. The question now was whether the council could grow beyond the rigid principles that had defined them for so long. The war had reached a breaking point. 3 more council worlds had fallen to the Voidborn advance, and the remaining fleets were pulling back toward the core systems in desperate retreat. Admiral Corvus stood in the command center of Nexus Prime, watching the tactical display show red enemy markers spreading like an infection across the galaxy. How many ships do we have left? He asked his aide, though he already knew the answer would be bad. Operational fleet strength is down to 38% of pre-war levels, the aide reported. Morale among the remaining crews is at critical lows. Many are requesting transfer to defensive positions around their homeworlds. Corvus understood their fear. The Voidborn seemed unstoppable, always knowing exactly how to counter every strategy the council developed. The enemy fought like they could read minds, anticipating every logical move and turning council strengths against themselves, in the depths of council space. Speaker Veltar made a decision that would have been unthinkable just months before. A proud leader who had once dismissed humanity as too primitive now found himself authorizing something that felt like surrender. Official contact with the species he had rejected. The message was sent through encrypted channels to avoid detection by either council hardliners or Voidborn forces. It was simple and direct. The Galactic Council requests immediate consultation with human representatives regarding the current crisis. All previous diplomatic decisions are open for review. Admiral Patricia Wells received the transmission aboard her flagship Independence, currently patrolling the outer rim of human space. Patricia had been Lisa Hayes' second-in-command during humanity's original diplomatic mission. She remembered the sting of rejection, but she also remembered the oath she had taken to protect innocent life wherever she found it. Assemble a response. Team, Patricia ordered her staff. Include our best strategists, xenopsychologists, and anyone who has experience with Voidborn encounters. The response came within hours. Humanity would meet with council representatives, but not on council. Terms. The meeting would take place in neutral space, with human security guarantees, and the council would have to accept that this was consultation, not submission. 3 days later, the most unlikely diplomatic gathering in galactic history took place. Aboard the human cruiser Defender in an empty star system halfway between human and council space. The council delegation included Speaker Veltar himself, Admiral Corvus, and Tisara of the Melodic Collective. The human delegation was led by Colonel Kevin Moore and Dr. Amy Clark, both veterans of the original diplomatic corps. Before we begin, Patricia Wells said, as the delegations faced each other across a conference table, I want to be clear about something. Humanity is not begging to join your council. We're not seeking your approval or recognition. We're here because people are dying, and we might be able to help. Veltar, looking older and more tired than he had 10 years ago, nodded slowly. We understand, Admiral Wells. The council acknowledges that our previous assessment of humanity may have been incomplete. It was not an apology, but it was closer to admitting error than the council had ever come before. Dr. Amy Clark activated a holographic display showing tactical analyses of recent Voidborn attacks. The first thing you need to understand is that you're not fighting a military campaign. You're fighting a psychological war against an enemy that knows exactly how you think. She manipulated the display to show patterns in the attacks. Every Voidborn strike is designed to cause maximum emotional damage while achieving military objectives. They're not just trying to defeat your forces. They're trying to break your spirit. Admiral Corvus studied the data carefully. How do you counter an enemy that anticipates logical responses? You stop being logical, Colonel Kevin Moore said with a slight smile. Or rather, you expand your definition of logic to include approaches your enemy can't predict. Kevin activated a tactical simulator that had been programmed with Voidborn behavior patterns. Watch this. He ran a standard council battle scenario, showing how logical formations and predictable maneuvers were easily countered by adaptive enemy tactics. Then he ran the same scenario using human tactical approaches. The display showed seemingly random ship movements, decisions based on intuition rather than rigid doctrine, and strategies that included psychological warfare alongside conventional weapons. The result was a decisive victory against the simulated Voidborn forces. Your crews follow orders and execute perfect formations, Kevin explained. That makes you predictable. Our crews are trained to think independently, to make decisions based on incomplete information, and to adapt their behavior based on gut feelings as much as data analysis. Tisara's musical harmonics carried notes of fascination and concern. You train your people to act irrationally? Dr. Amy Clark shook her head. We train them to act human. Sometimes that means making decisions that don't look logical from the outside, but work because they come from a fundamentally different way of thinking about problems. She showed them examples of human responses to refugee crisis, where decisions based on empathy and emotional intelligence had led to better outcomes than purely rational resource allocation. She demonstrated how human creativity in engineering had solved problems that mathematical optimization could not address. The Voidborn understand ordered thinking because they were exiled by an ordered civilization, Amy continued. They've spent thousands of years studying rational responses and developing counters for them. But they can't counter chaos, creativity, and compassion because those aren't logical enough to predict. Speaker Veltar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a humility that surprised everyone present. If humanity were willing to assist in this crisis, what would you require? Patricia Wells had been expecting this question. full operational independence for human forces, no interference with our tactical decisions, complete access to intelligence, about Voidborn capabilities and previous encounters, and most importantly, a guarantee that this cooperation will not be used as justification for future control over human activities. You want to help us fight our war, but you don't want to join our civilization, Corvus observed. We want to help end the killing, Patricia replied. But we've learned that we don't fit well in rigid hierarchies. We work better as independent allies than as subordinate members. The negotiations continued for hours, with both sides carefully defining the terms of cooperation. The Council struggled with concepts like independent authority and tactical flexibility, while humans wrestled with the challenge of working alongside species that valued predictability over innovation. Finally, an agreement was reached. Human forces would coordinate with Council fleets, but under human command authority. Intelligence would be shared freely in both directions. Most importantly, the cooperation would be evaluated based on results, not adherence to established protocols. The first joint operation was planned immediately. Captain Sam Rodriguez would lead a combined human council task force in a strike against a Voidborn staging area in the Vega system. The mission would test whether different approaches to warfare could work together. Effectively, Sam spent hours studying the Voidborn positions with his council counterparts. Admiral Corvus wanted to approach with overwhelming force and standard battle formations. Captain Verlin of the Regellian merchant fleet suggested using stealth approaches and precision strikes. The debate went in circles until Sam made a suggestion that surprised everyone. What if we don't try to coordinate our different approaches? He asked. What if we use them as weapons? He outlined a strategy that deliberately used the conflict between human unpredictability and Council order as a tactical advantage. Council forces would approach using standard formations, drawing Voidborn attention and causing them to deploy their usual counters. Then human forces would strike from unexpected angles using unconventional tactics that the enemy would not anticipate. You want to use our predictability as bait? Corvus asked. I want to use it as a feature, Sam replied. Your enemies expect you to be logical. We'll give them what they expect, and then hit them with what they can't predict. The plan was unlike anything either side had attempted before. It required trust between species that had been separate for 10 years. Coordination between command structures that operated on completely different principles, and faith that diversity of approach could be stronger than unity of method. As the joint fleet prepared for hyperspace jump toward the Vega system, both humans and aliens wondered if they were about to prove that cooperation could overcome ancient hatred, or if they were simply flying toward another devastating defeat. Dr. Rebecca Torres, observing from the command deck of the Independence, made a note in her personal log. Today we find out if the galaxy is big enough for more than one way of thinking, or if the Voidborn were right to hate the civilizations that rejected them. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying the hopes of two very different approaches to existence toward a confrontation that would determine the future of galactic civilization. The combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vega system like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. Council ships flew in perfect formations, their hulls gleaming with the precision that came from thousands of years of military tradition. Human vessels moved in loose groups that seemed almost chaotic, each captain making individual decisions about positioning and approach vectors. General Lisa Hayes coordinated the human forces from her flagship, Constitution, while Admiral Corvus commanded the Council fleet from his dreadnought Eternal Harmony. For the first time in galactic history, two completely different military philosophies were working together instead of against each other. Voidborn forces detected, reported Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell from her sensor station. They're deployed around the gas giant exactly as predicted. Standard defensive formation. Lisa studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The enemy had positioned themselves the way any logical commander would expect. The Voidborn had learned to anticipate rational strategies so well that they had become predictable themselves. Admiral Corvus, Lisa transmitted to the Council. Flagship, begin your approach. Make it look exactly like Battle Plan Gamma 4. The Council ships moved forward in textbook formation, presenting the Voidborn with exactly what they expected to see. Enemy vessels began to maneuver into positions. That would counter the standard Council attack pattern. Everything was proceeding exactly as the Joint Command had hoped. Human squadrons, begin random approach, Lisa ordered. Remember, trust your instincts and ignore the tactical computers. This was the hardest part for both sides. Council officers, watching the human ships, had to resist the urge to call them back into proper formation. Human pilots had to overcome years of training that emphasized coordination and unit cohesion. But as the chaotic dance of human vessels approached the Voidborn positions, something unexpected happened. The enemy began to hesitate. For the first time in the war, Voidborn commanders were seeing something they could not predict or counter. Their entire tactical advantage had been based on understanding how ordered civilizations thought and fought. But human tactics were not ordered. They were creative, emotional, and unpredictable in ways that no logical analysis could anticipate. Captain Sam Rodriguez led the first human attack wave in his destroyer determination. Instead of approaching the enemy stronghold directly, he guided his ship in a spiral pattern that seemed to serve no tactical purpose. Behind him, other human vessels followed their own seemingly random paths toward the Voidborn positions. All human ships, remember what we discussed, Sam transmitted on the open channel. Fight like humans, not like machines. The first contact came when human fighter squadrons engaged Voidborn interceptors. Instead of maintaining formation and following standard attack patterns, human pilots broke into individual duels, each using personal flying styles developed over years of training. Some pilots flew aggressively, pushing their ships to dangerous limits. Others used careful, defensive approaches that emphasized survival over quick victories. The Voidborn interceptors, programmed to counter known fighter tactics, found themselves confused by the variety of approaches. They could adapt to one or two different styles, but not to 20 different pilots all fighting in completely different ways. Meanwhile, the Council fleet continued its careful advance, drawing more Voidborn attention. Admiral Corvus watched, his tactical display with growing amazement as human ships seemed to appear from impossible angles, striking at Voidborn positions that should have been impregnable. "How are they doing that?" asked his tactical officer. "They are not thinking like us," Corvus replied with something that might have been admiration. "They are thinking like themselves." The battle reached its turning point when the main Voidborn command ship, a massive vessel that had been the center of enemy coordination, suddenly found itself surrounded. Council ships had drawn the defensive fleet away with their predictable approach, while human vessels had somehow slipped through the gaps in ways that no tactical computer could have calculated. But instead of destroying the command ship immediately, General Hayes made a decision that surprised everyone, including her own officers. "Open a communication channel to the Voidborn commander," she ordered. "General, with respect, we have them trapped," protested Colonel Kevin Moore. "This is our chance to end their command structure. This is our chance to end something bigger than their command structure," Lisa replied. The face that appeared on the main screen was clearly Voidborn, but underneath the technological modifications and the scars of centuries in dark space, it was recognizably similar to species that belonged to the current Council. The being's eyes held an anger and pain that seemed to burn across the communication link. "I am War Leader Kethfer of the Voidborn fleets," the alien said in a voice that carried the weight of ancient hatred. You fight well for servants of the Council, but you cannot change what we have become. We're not servants of the Council, Lisa replied calmly. We're humans. And we know who you really are. She activated a data transmission that sent the historical records. Maya Johnson had discovered the truth about the Kethmori and their exile from the ancient galactic civilization. As Kethver reviewed the information, his expression slowly changed from anger to something else. You know our history, he said finally. You understand why we fight. We understand why you hurt, Lisa corrected. But we also understand that you're not really fighting the species that wronged you. You're fighting their children, their grandchildren, people who had nothing to do with your exile. The communication channel fell silent, except for the background noise of ongoing combat. Around the command ship, human and Council forces held their positions, waiting to see if this moment would bring peace or just another battle. The Council rejected us too, Lisa continued. 10 years ago, they told us we were too emotional, too unpredictable, too primitive for galactic civilization. They sent us away just like your ancestors were sent away. Kethver's scarred features showed surprise. Yet you fight alongside them now. We fight to stop the killing, Lisa said. And we fight to prove that there's room in the galaxy for more than one way of thinking. She transmitted another data package, this one showing human colonies, human achievements, and human philosophy. Images of diverse cultures working together, of problems solved through cooperation rather than domination, of a species that had turned rejection into strength rather than hatred. We learned something in our exile, Lisa explained. We learned that being different is not a weakness, it's a strength. The galaxy doesn't need one perfect way of thinking. It needs all the different ways of thinking working together. For long minutes, the Voidborn war leader studied the human data. Around him, his own forces had stopped fighting, waiting for his decision. The Council ships also held position, their crews struggling to understand this new approach to warfare. What do you propose? Kethver asked finally. An end to the exile, Lisa replied. For all of us. A new kind of galactic community where being different is valued instead of feared. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in galactic history. They took place in space, with ships from 3 different civilizations forming a rough circle around the gas giant. Humans served as mediators between the Council and the Voidborn, using their understanding of both logical order and emotional chaos to bridge gaps that had seemed impossible to cross. Dr. Sarah Martinez, Earth's new chief diplomat, worked with representatives from all sides to establish principles for a new kind of galactic alliance. Instead of the rigid hierarchy of the old Council, they designed a loose confederation where different species could contribute their unique strengths without being forced to conform to a single standard. The agreement reached in the Vega system was not perfect. Many Voidborn chose to remain in dark space, too damaged by centuries of exile to trust any galactic civilization. Some Council species refused to accept the new alliance, preferring the old ways of order and predictability. But enough species from all sides agreed to try something new. The galaxy that emerged was messier than what had come before, more chaotic and harder to predict. But it was also more alive, more creative, and more capable of handling the unexpected challenges that the universe could throw at any civilization. Admiral Carl Thompson established the first interspecies exploration command, where human curiosity worked alongside Council precision and Voidborn innovation to push deeper into the unknown regions of space than any single species could have managed alone. Captain Daniel White, speaking for Earth in the first session of the new Galactic Alliance, made humanity's position clear. We're not interested in ruling the galaxy or being ruled by it. We're interested in being part of it. Years later, when historians looked back at the moment that changed galactic civilization, they would mark it not as the day humanity joined the stars, But as the stars learned to accept that strength. Comies from diversity, not uniformity. The Council had let humanity go, thinking they were protecting galactic civilization from chaos. Instead, they had learned that sometimes chaos is exactly what civilization needs to survive and grow. The pain of that lesson would echo through the galaxy for generations.